Okay, hi, and welcome to another episode of Viewpoints. For those who haven't joined us before, Viewpoints is a monthly-ish podcast where we record in VR in this lovely environment here, and we talk to the creators, entrepreneurs, and investors who are building the category-defining companies in 3D and spatial computing. And I'm really thrilled to have some awesome guests. We spent a lot of time trying to find the right setting, bringing in some objects in and creating the space. So hopefully this should be a fun one. I'm just going to introduce Petri, my co-host. Petri, if you can introduce yourselves, and then we'll go to Greg and Alban to do quick intros themselves.
Yeah, hi guys. Petri from Finland, managing a portfolio of 14 XR companies, ranging from all of the Nordic countries and one from the UK. Really looking forward to this session here with our guests from Sketchfab and one of their investors. So why don't we dive right into it? And first of all, maybe Greg, you can introduce yourself and maybe also give a brief background into how you got into investing into XR.
So my name is Greg Castle. I run a fund called Anorak Ventures. We focus on companies being built around differentiated technology. Oftentimes we invest in technical founders. I got my start investing. I got my start in the investing world, investing in Oculus. It was one of my first investments, and obviously that worked out very well. And that kind of is the stepladder that I used to continue on in my investing journey, and have made 80 investments since then. I invested in the first VR unicorn, which was Oculus, and also been lucky enough to invest in the second, which is Rec Room. Also lucky enough to invest in Alban's company, Sketchfab. We're very active. We are focused on pre-seed and seed. Do a lot of VR AR investing, but also a lot of investing in companies that are leveraging some of the same technologies like robotics and computer vision, and also just invest in general kind of SaaS companies. Great founders that are solving big problems. That's about it for me. I've been investing full-time for almost 7 years now.
Yeah, awesome. And maybe you could just reel off just a few of the portfolio companies other than Sketchfab and Rec Room that are kind of relevant to this discussion.
So I'm an investor in Oso VR, which is a surgical simulation platform that leverages virtual reality as well. I was an investor in a company called 6D that was acquired by Niantic. I was an investor in a company called Loom AI, which was acquired by Roblox. Super Medium, Vantage Point, and probably another 10 more that I'm forgetting about on the spot. But I invest quite a bit in the space.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great portfolio and some great companies. So Alban, maybe you can introduce yourselves, and hopefully most people tuning in will have some idea of what Sketchfab is and will have interacted. But let's assume there's someone in the audience who doesn't know. So maybe introduce yourselves and then give the high level what Sketchfab is today.
So hi everyone, I'm Alban, co-founder and CEO of Sketchfab. Sketchfab is a platform to publish and find 3D content. Our core product is a web-based 3D player. We built the first web-based 3D player on the market, and we built a platform around it to let people reshare, embed, play, host 3D files online. And from this utility, we grew a library of 3D content around it. And so today we're the largest library of 3D files on the internet.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think recently you just had your 9th anniversary and hit 5 million users, right? Is there any kind of other stats of just, to show the kind of the speed at which you've been growing and the number of files that are now on the Sketchfab platform?
So we host over 3 million 3D files on the platform. In general, we almost double every year in terms of user base and content. And then we have
we passed a few months ago over 1 million downloads per month. More and more users are coming to get content. And then I was just checking today our traffic stats, and we just passed 2 billion 3D views powered by Sketchfab across our entire lifetime.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. And from humble beginnings, I've heard the origin story, and it always fascinates me. But yeah, maybe you can kind of go back to those days, just recount, how you went from being, an idea to meeting your co-founders, and then getting the first version of Sketchfab shipped, and kind of moving out to the US to start the business proper.
Sure. So I'm more of a business background. I went to business school back in Paris, in France. I always loved to make things. I do sculpture as a hobby. And so back in 2011, I discovered 3D printing, which was, consumer 3D printing was very, very new, especially back in France. And so I started telling everybody about 3D printing and how crazy it was. I had no idea what I was talking about. And then in early 2012, I was at a party just telling people about 3D printing. Someone introduced me to a guy called Cedric, who was at the same party. Because he was a 3D programmer, he told me, hey, if you like 3D printing, you should go talk to Cedric back there. And Cedric had never heard about 3D printing. He had been a 3D programmer in the video game industry for 15 years, mostly self-made. It turned out he had just spent the past year building an MVP of the first ever web-based 3D player based on WebGL. So WebGL was introduced by Mozilla back in 2011. And Cedric was hired by Mozilla to make the first demo of WebGL. Yeah, so Mozilla launched WebGL in March 2011. And Cedric was hired by Mozilla to make the first demo of WebGL for the launch of Firefox 4. And then started freelancing and geeking around WebGL. And so when I met him a year later, 9 months later, January 2012, he already had a working prototype. He had just told pretty much nobody about it. And I found his call. And so I just offered to help him out on anything that was non-technical, just finding a name and actually launching the product and getting press and all that. And that's how it started. And it immediately took off because it was the first web-based 3D player on the market.
Awesome. And it's kind of really interesting because France seems to have this really rich history of, people coming out of the 3D industry. There's a lot of great VR companies in the space. And you have things like, conferences like Laval, which, is a VR conference that has been going for 20 years or something crazy. What is that about France? Is it unique to France? And then what made you, can you maybe kind of describe your move to the US and how you've kind of split the team between US and France since?
Sure. So I'm not a developer, so I only comment from what I see as an outsider, I guess. But in general, we have a very strong education in mathematics, and I think it's a core a piece at being good in geometry and 3D and in general. And then I think we also have a culture of trying to tackle hard problems, even just for the sake of it, like even if there is no market or no distribution, like we like to go after technical challenges. So these are kind of the two elements I would mention.
Yeah, and then of course you moved over to the US when you joined Techstars, which was the kind of the first or one of the early money into the business, right?
So actually spent some time in San Francisco before that. At the end of 2012, we went through Web Forward, which was Mozilla's accelerator. So we spent 3 months in San Francisco and then back to Paris. And then we were the first mover in the market. And so we knew we needed to have at least 1 foot in the US because that's where large software partners and a big part of our user base was going to be and distribution and funding and all that. So we applied to Techstars and we got accepted into Techstars New York, spring 2013. So that's how we moved to the US.
So if we fast forward a little bit, a couple of years, Greg, can you tell us your side of the story? how when you heard for the first time about Sketchfab, what did you think about it? Where was the company at the moment, and how did you? I mean, you were tracking the company, right? And how did you then get to be or decide to invest in the company?
So I was, before I became a full-time investor, I was at Autodesk, and I was looking after games technology group from a marketing standpoint. And Autodesk had a position in TurboSquid, and most people, a lot of people don't know how big Autodesk is in the gaming industry. I mean, there's, a massive pipeline of what it takes to build games, and the modeling and animation part of it is often overlooked. And instead, the game engines, Unity, Epic, get a lot more attention, but there's this whole other side to actually creating, and that's Autodesk's business, right? 3ds Max and Maya. So anyway, I was spending time looking at the industry and where I felt the opportunities were, and marketplaces were an area that I was particularly excited about. The thesis essentially being that, sure, some people like creating from scratch, but a lot of people just like getting models and modifying them. You don't necessarily need to build a model from scratch to make it feel like it's your own. And the Sketchfab was on my radar from my times of being an employee at Autodesk. And the thesis essentially was, in my head, that 3D was going to be big in the future. There were going to be more and easier ways to capture 3D, and people were going to need a place to store that 3D, and there was a whole opportunity to trade these things, to build community around these things, et cetera, et cetera. And over time, there was a bunch of companies that kind of came and went, but there was always one company that seemed to be on a steady and exciting growth trajectory, and that was Sketchfab. And after I left Autodesk and started to invest full time, I don't remember whether or not I had reached out to Alban before when I was still at Autodesk. I'm not sure, but in any case, I reached out to Alban and wasn't interested, and he wasn't fundraising, and I just kind of persisted and kept on being in touch with him, and we just kind of developed a friendship, and talked about the industry and whatnot. And then a day came where Alban was like, what, like we could use a little bit more capital, like I know what we would do with it. And I was like, yay. And at that point, I got involved, but I got involved long down the road. I mean, I think I made the investment in it was either 16 or 17, maybe it was probably 17. So they were already long, doing their thing and great. And I just, the longer I had spent around the industry and the more excited I had been, the more confident I got in the potential for Sketchfab's future. And even though I am an investor that really focuses on pre-seed and seed, I mean, at Oculus, it was friends and family round that I was involved in. At Rec Room, it was the seed round that I was involved in. The opportunity was so exciting for me with Sketchfab that I got in, long after they had started, and the valuation was already, pretty healthy. And I was just excited to get involved, and also got the one of the founders of Oculus is somebody who I went to school with. I'm actually close friends with all of the founders over there, but one in particular, Brendan, and I went to school together, and he's still one of my, he's one of my closest friends, and just kind of pinged him and said, hey, there's this company that I'm really excited about that I think has a super bright future. And he got excited about it, and then he ended up investing in the company as well.
That's great. And Alban, you actually wrote a really great blog post about getting to profitability and surviving the so-called VR winter, and you talk a bit about the financing. So if anyone's listening and wants more information on that, I would definitely go and check out that post. It was really insightful. But I guess kind of as you're raising, you were kind of really raising on this vision that 3D is kind of eating the world. If Andreessen Horowitz say software is eating the world, it feels like we're now shifting into this, kind of perpetual 3D space where 3D becomes just so much more important to all of our computing. I'd love to hear, like, either Greg or Alban or both of you just talk about that vision. If you zoom out from Sketchfab, what do we mean by, 3D is eating the world?
So I always look at it from both the creation and consumption side of things. So on the creation side of things, I think it's a principle of art is to imitate nature, and as human beings, we've always tried to imitate nature and reproduce nature. And we started with painting in caves, then we got photography, and then we got video. We kept getting closer and closer to what the actual world looks like. But we live in a 3D world, and so for me, 3D capture is the ultimate medium, and I mean, it's reaching the full potential of replicating nature. And so if we can do it, we are going to do it. And so a key thesis was that 3D capture was eventually going to become mainstream. And so I've believed this since 2012. And the latest iPhone just shipped with a dev camera, kind of dating this thesis. So just almost 10 years more than what I hoped, but it's finally coming here. And then on the consumption side, we believe that VR is ultimate computing platform, allowing us to get rid of smartphones and like hardware devices, and just get eventually lenses or form factors of glasses. This computing platform will need 3D versions of everything to exist, like digital twins of everything to populate all the digital layers of the AR world. So a strong belief that there will be a market need for versions of things. And so Sketchfab sits right at the middle. Everybody creates through capture, and everybody eventually is going to consume through AR. And this is kind of how I see this things.
I would say that the Mark Andreessen quote of "software is eating the world" is slowly, is proving to be right. And the reason is because software makes it an easier way to organize and to be productive for so many different use cases. Software ones and zeros are much easier to manipulate than atoms. So even if you just look at the most basic example of pushing paper around versus having a spreadsheet and having software systems that enable you to collaborate and be productive, that's a very basic example of a way in which software is superior. So I think if you carry along in that same line of thinking and you think about 3D versus atoms and the real world, it makes total sense why 3D is now eating the world. It's essentially an extension of software eating the world. It is much easier to manipulate and run scenarios and projections on a digital twin of a city than it is to run a simulation on an actual city. It is much easier to test the aerodynamics of a car in the digital world than it is to create a full model and throw it into a wind tunnel, and so on and so forth. So from an enterprise standpoint, I think it's kind of more of the same. Software is eating the world. 3D is eating the world. 3D is software. It's the same thing there. And And then I also think about games and collectibles and art and things like that. And I think about the amount of time that people are spending on their phones and in the, it's funny. We often refer to the metaverse as Roblox or as Rec Room or as something like that. I kind of, I think the metaverse, quote unquote, has started really when Facebook started to take off and people started to spend an exorbitant amount of time in Facebook. You have this whole other digital self now that exists through social media and through other aspects. And that was kind of the beginnings of the metaverse. And I think that we're just seeing this continue on. And I think that, when I was a kid, it was baseball cards that we were trading, and it was toys that we were showing, that we were kind of flexing with and showing how cool we are and expressing ourselves with. And I think, I think my kid and hopefully my kids, I just had my first kid, but hopefully we'll have more, will be not flexing with Matchbox cars or with cards. I think they'll be flexing with digital goods, with 3D art, with characters, with things that exist in the metaverse, so to speak.
Yeah, congrats, by the way. I have to ask, obviously, everybody's talking about it, but we have to, you kind of brought it up, but NFTs, which everybody's talking about, it kind of seems highly applicable for this space. What's your view on that area right now? Are you bullish on it, and is it going to last?
My view is that I think the promise of what NFTs are is very cool and will be big in the future. But I think right now it's an incomplete product and it's an incomplete protocol. This idea that, that these receipts, which is essentially all they are, for artwork that everybody has available pixel level replicas of the exact same original, is an incomplete system. I think where NFTs will start to get interesting is when you can actually when people start to figure out, and there's a couple of people who are working on this right now, but where people start to figure out how you can attach original source files, how you can attach metadata, how you can do different things so that you're actually getting the artwork as well, and potentially the artwork that nobody else has access to. I think that's one part of it. And then I think that the other part of it is when there starts to be more of a built out suite of things that you can do with these NFTs. So right now, all of the games that are out there, all of the digital universes and environments that people interact with are these closed world, closed garden experiences where they monetize. Fortnite makes money by people buying skins in Fortnite. And so their motivation to allow people to buy goods elsewhere and bring them into the game, it's not really there at the moment. I think once we get into a future where perhaps there are some of these games and metaverses that are built out on more open protocols, and you can start to bring in some of these limited edition goods and do things with them, then I think we'll start to get to a place where NFTs can really start to be interesting. But right now, I'm not bullish on them, and I think there's a lot of reason. There's a lot of money that's trapped in crypto right now that people don't want to bring out into fiat. It's a lot of the same money circulating around, going from one place to another. I also, I question a lot of the prices that people are paying for different things. So I'm not bullish in its current iteration, but I do think there is a future for it for sure.
I was just saying, so you haven't quite yet bought your $3 million pair of sneakers, but not quite yet.
Not quite.
But cool. So speaking of sneakers, Alban, I mean, you have a lot of people uploading sneakers, but also now scanning things into the platform. And you talked about, this real kind of democratization of creation for 3D, right? So before you used to have the 20 million professional 3D artists, they would get utility out of the platform. But now, with my iPhone 11, I can now, scan my living room or go out and scan an object in the real world and upload it to Sketchfab. And you've been doing this a lot on Twitter, right? And we brought in some of the objects. Maybe you could talk through why you think that's a really important kind of, topic for you guys. And maybe just for those who are thinking about, how do I actually start, creating my own objects? I know you've written a few blog posts. Maybe just talk us through that in a bit more detail.
So first, I think it's really important because, as I mentioned earlier, I think 3D is the ultimate medium, and so if you can capture in 3D, you should. A lot of people keep asking me, like, why would I make a 3D scan? Like, what's the utility of it? And I'm actually writing a post about this, but it doesn't have to have a utility to be important and relevant. I end up scanning a lot of things. I typically make scans of my kids, of my food, of this cake, of places. And all of this have kind of a 2D equivalent in the world of the Instagram. Like on Instagram, you share pics of your friends and your kids and your food and places that look good. And so I'm essentially capturing the same things, but in a spatial way. And today it sounds a bit awkward for a lot of people, but I think it will be much more obvious and relevant when the consumption of this content is going to happen in a spatial way. So today, everyone has AR glasses. Of course, you'll want to be able to consume 3D content and revisit places in 3D and so on. And then, yeah, with the latest iPhone, has a built-in LiDAR, which means that before that, I would make most of my scans with photogrammetry, so taking a ton of pictures, like 100 or 200 or 300 pictures around something, and then process them in a photogrammetry software to stitch the images. And so it was computer intensive, required to go for a PC, and took a lot of time. And now with just my phone, I can just go over something. And so like this van back there was scanned in literally 3 minutes, just with my phone, processed on device. And yeah, just a cool way to document something that is interesting. And then like this cake, birthday cake of my son William, scanned in literally 1 second. Like it's just it's record on 3D scanner app, and it captures the 3D of it. And then this mural in Brooklyn was so the van was scanned with Scanniverse, and then the mural was scanned with Polycam. They are kind of my 3 go-to apps. They all have a native direct share to Sketchfab feature, so it's really a one-click process to upload there. And yeah, I'm writing a lot about tips on how to make better scans, but mostly comes down to practice and using the good settings and scanning the right things.
Yeah, if you're interested in this area, I highly recommend following Alban on Twitter for great tips and great content.
Yep. And maybe, Greg, I can come to you, and we're going to have to wrap up in a few minutes, so maybe 2 more questions. But Greg, when you look at the 3D space, I mean, Sketchfab is at the heart of it, but now we're seeing more creation tools. So, platforms like Petri and WOMP and Spline. But we're also seeing these really interesting ways of consuming stuff and things like capturing volumetric data, not just kind of, still objects, volumetric video. I mean, what are the other kind of startup opportunities you see in this space, either startups you've seen or things that you'd love founders to build, actually?
So I think I still think that the meeting space has opportunity there. I invested in a company called Arthur, which is doing a enterprise meeting platform that makes it really easy for you to pull in 3D objects into the space, and has a whole bunch of different tools that are really spatial to help you to help facilitate productive meetings. With regards to opportunities, so I think that, if I believe in the future that people are going to start following Alban's lead a lot more and start really enjoying capturing objects that they see. I think that how you show those off to other people and how you display them, I use that word flex again, how you kind of flex and show them off, I think represents a really interesting opportunity. If you look at Funko Pop dolls, for example, there's a very avid collector community around these Funko Pop dolls, and they're super cool. And some of them, some of them glow on black lights, et cetera, et cetera. And when you go onto the subreddit of Funko Pop dolls, or you go into the subreddit of most collectors, they take almost as much pride in how they display their collection as the collection themselves. And so the opportunity to create a consumer app, I've often referred to it as kind of a trophy case of 3D objects, I think is a pretty interesting opportunity. So the idea of how you display them both in the digital world and also how you display them in the physical world. So I'm an investor in the Looking Glass company, which produces these holographic displays, which are incredibly cool, and they're just getting better and better and lighter, more high fidelity. And I have a bunch of the things that I've scanned in 3D being shown on the Looking Glass on rotation, and I love it. So I think digitally how you display them, and then physically how you display them in the real world, I think are both very interesting opportunities that I'm currently kind of looking for startups building in that space.
Yeah, awesome. All right, good stuff. Well, we're out of time. I feel like we could easily have chatted for at least another half an hour and drawn a bit more wisdom out of Alban while we had him. But Alban, maybe you could just finish up with, if people want to follow along, where are you tweeting, and then any kind of things that you want to draw people's attention to when it comes to Sketchfab.
Sure. So you can follow me on Twitter, ALBN. And then, we're working on a lot of new things, better ways to embed the content, better way to manage it privately, and then better ways to distribute it and import it in other applications. I just suggest you try 3D scanning if you haven't done so already, and thank you for listening.
Yeah, awesome. And I would love to see a big kind of hint for Engage. We're in the Engage platform today. I would love to see a Sketchfab integration with these guys so we could just pull these objects in very simply. That would be great. And Greg, where can people find you? If founders are looking to pitch for you, what's the best way to reach out?
I'm pretty active on Twitter, G for Peter Castle 12. And my website has the ability to fill out a form. That just gives the high level on what you're working on. It enables us to process the large amount of people who come and are interested in funding in an efficient manner. So whether or not it's through our website or just hitting me up on Twitter, I'm open.
Awesome. Yeah. So let's wrap it up. I'm on Twitter also, P Rajahalme. So hit me up, and always looking to talk to interesting founders. And where can we find you, Dave?
Yep, so I'm at Haynes_Dave on Twitter, and we also do a weekly Viewpoints on Clubhouse. It's slightly more straightforward than in VR, but that's a weekly, so come and find us over there as well. Brilliant. Thanks, guys. Thanks. I really appreciate the time. Thanks. And take care, everybody.
Bye.